The roar of motorcycles shattered the quiet evening, sending a ripple of unease through the sleepy little town. Shopkeepers froze mid-task, glancing up from their counters. Diners near the window of Sammy's cafe set down their coffee cups, watching as 6 bikes rumbled through Main Street, their chrome gleaming under the neon lights. They parked in a ragged formation outside a small, unassuming hardware store, Callahan's Supply Depot. Inside, Mike Callahan barely looked up. The veteran Navy SEAL, now just a simple shopkeeper, was arranging a new shipment of tools, his movements calm, precise, methodical, like a man who had seen it all and didn't scare easy. The shop bell jingled. Then came the boots, heavy, deliberate steps as the gang flooded into the store, spreading out, taking up space, like wolves circling prey. The leader, Axel Wade, strode up to the counter, a cocky smirk on his scarred face. Mike took him in at a glance. Early 40s, cocky, stupid. A man used to people backing down. Behind him, his crew made themselves at home, leaning against shelves, knocking over cans of screws, laughing among themselves. Mike said nothing. He picked up a rag and slowly wiped his hands, looking at them with calm, unreadable eyes. "Evening, boys," he said finally. Axel grinned. "Nice little shop you got here." Mike didn't blink. "That's so?" Axel tapped the counter with one thick gloved finger. "See, we're expanding our operations, helping local businesses with security." Mike tilted his head slightly. "You run a security company?" The gang snickered. "You could say that," Axel said. "But the thing is, security ain't cheap, and I'd hate to see a fine establishment like this have trouble." One of his men tipped over a shelf, sending boxes of nails spilling onto the floor. Mike's jaw clenched ever so slightly. Axel leaned in. "So how about this, old man? You pay us a little respect fee, and in return, we make sure your store stays safe." The silence stretched. Mike set down the rag. Then, without a word, he walked to the front door and locked it. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Axel's smirk faltered. The gang shifted uneasily. "The hell you do that for?" one of them muttered. Mike turned back, rolling up the sleeves of his flannel shirt, revealing forearms like stone, lined with old scars. "I don't like repeating myself," he said, voice smooth as steel. Axel snorted. "You got a death wish, Grandpa?" Mike smiled faintly. "You ever heard the phrase, 'train like you fight'?" Axel frowned. Then, before anyone could react, Mike moved. The first man to step forward was Diesel, a 6'4" slab of muscle with arms like tree trunks. He swung first, a wild, looping punch meant to knock Mike out cold. Mike was already gone. He sidestepped smoothly, his body moving with the kind of effortless precision that comes from years of combat training. Before Diesel could react, Mike's elbow snapped up, hard and fast, slamming under his chin. Diesel's head snapped back, his knees buckled. He hit the floor like a felled tree. The others barely had time to process it before Mike grabbed a nearby crowbar from the shelf and spun it in a lazy arc. Axel's smirk was gone. "Get him!" 2 bikers rushed forward. Mike was faster. The first guy swung a knife. Mike caught his wrist, twisted viciously. A wet snap echoed through the store. The biker screamed as his knife clattered to the floor. Mike planted a boot in his chest, sending him crashing into a rack of paint cans. The second guy charged. Mike ducked under the punch, came up, and cracked the crowbar across his ribs. The man collapsed, gasping for air. In the span of 10 seconds, half of Axel's crew was on the ground. The remaining 2 hesitated. Axel's face paled. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. Mike finally stepped forward, crouching to Axel's level. "I was a Navy SEAL for 22 years, he said quietly. "I've taken down men twice your size in half the time." Axel swallowed hard. Mike grabbed Axel's collar, pulling him close. "You ever step foot in my store again?" He smiled. "You won't walk out." Axel nodded furiously. Mike let him go. Axel scrambled back. "Pick him up!" he snapped at his remaining men. Within seconds, the bikers dragged their fallen out of the store, hurrying toward their bikes, no longer laughing. Mike walked to the door, unlocked it, and held it open. "Get out." The Ravagers MC tore out of town. They never came back. The roar of motorcycles faded into the night, leaving behind only the faint scent of burnt rubber and shattered egos. Mike Callahan watched them go, standing in the doorway of his hardware store, the neon glow from his open sign flickering behind him. The town was silent, but Mike knew people had been watching. From the diner across the street, from the gas station on the corner, from behind half-drawn curtains in second-story apartments. By morning, everyone would know. Mike stepped back inside, surveying the damage. A knocked-over display of wrenches, spilled nails and screws littering the floor, a cracked shelf. He sighed, grabbed a broom, and started cleaning. Because at the end of the day, this was still just another Tuesday. By the time Mike walked into Sammy's diner for his morning coffee, the place was already buzzing. Eyes followed him as he approached the counter. People whispered, but no one dared to ask. Not yet. It wasn't until Sheriff Tom Grady strolled in, dropped his hat on the counter, and slid onto the stool next to Mike that someone finally broke the silence. "You gonna tell me why 6 bikers left town with their tails between their legs last night?" Tom asked, voice laced with amusement. Mike took a sip of coffee. "Nope." Tom smirked. "That's what I figured." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I looked into you after I heard what happened. You want to explain why I found a 20-year service record in the seals with your name on it?" Mike shrugged. Didn't seem relevant. Tom shook his head, chuckling. "You know, they won't be back." Mike nodded. "They learned their lesson." Tom stirred his coffee. "You always this quiet." "Only when I'm awake," Mike said. Tom laughed. "Damn, Callahan. No wonder those boys ran." That afternoon, a small envelope arrived at the store. No return address. Inside was a wad of cash, a few $1,000s at least, and a note, scrawled in hurried handwriting. "No hard feelings. Consider it a donation." Mike smirked. The Ravagers MC paid up after all. Not in threats, not in intimidation, but in respect. Over the next few weeks, the story spread like wildfire. Some people said Mike had taken down all 6 bikers at once. Others said he'd fought them blindfolded. One old man at the gas station swore Mike had thrown a guy through a window. None of it was true, but Mike didn't bother correcting them. Because in a small town like this, a good story was better than the truth. And the truth was simple. Mike Callahan wasn't looking for trouble, but if it came knocking, he'd answer.